All right, here we go, gentlemen. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Joining me today to discuss the world of photography this week are Mr. Derrick Story, Mr. Don Komarechka, and the Aperture expert, photos expert, Mr. Joseph Linaschke. Hey, guys, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Let's start with Derrick. Derrick, I haven't seen you on the show in forever. I know you've been out circling the globe doing all kinds of crazy stuff. What's going on in the world of Derrick Story?
You're right. I just got back from I was 2 weeks in Europe, and I just had a blast and getting some stuff done now. Then I head off to Maui next week. So I love this time of year.
A month in the life of Derrick. Look at that.
Fortunately, Apple was kind enough to save their little bombshell for a while I was here, because it would have been difficult on the road to deal with it. Yeah.
What bombshell? Did something happen? I don't know.
Yeah, there was a Aperture iPhoto thing. We probably should check the show notes.
Yeah, we can talk about that next week. It's not
all right.
All right. Also on the show is Mr. Don Komarechka. Hey, Don, what's going on, man?
Hello, Frederick. Busy as always. Did some night photography, and there was a big photo walk in Toronto recently, an annual thing that gets a lot of Google Plus users, photographers out to roam around the city streets. And so I had 2 full days and got lots of images I need to edit, and that's been a lot of fun. Getting out and chatting with photographers is always a blast, too, and so that keeps me inspired. So I'm pretty inspired at the moment, and been experimenting as I have been for quite a while. I just picked up an ultraviolet modified camera to explore an entirely new world. A lot of people know I've experimented with infrared, and that's a lot of fun. But hopefully I'll find some cool new stuff to explore in UV as well.
Crazy. Always the scientist. You're like the Doc Brown of photography. I love it.
I try.
All right. Also, last but not least, my good buddy over there, Mr. Joseph Linaschke, a.k.a. the Aperture expert. Hey, Joseph.
Hey, Frederick, how you doing?
Why are you shrinking back there, man? Don't be shy. It's okay.
Who's shrinking? Who's shy? Never shy.
All right, cool. Welcome to the
Never
show.
shy.
What's going on with you? I know you've got a bunch of stuff going on as well, aside from the big news that happened this week.
Yeah, you know what big news? I don't know what you're talking about. I just got back from a workshop in Bend. Or I was attending a workshop, actually. It was a landscape photography workshop with photographer Sean Bagshaw, who's really well known for his landscape work, and Zach Schnimpf, who's his partner in crime up there. And it was really cool. Landscape isn't something I normally do, and it's one of those things you think, how hard can it be? And then you look at photographs from the professionals, and you go, what? Wait, how did that happen? I saw that sunset. I didn't see that picture. So I spent a weekend with those guys, and it was a blast just getting out of my normal shooting zone, and learned a lot, came away with a lot of new tips, and a totally new appreciation for what it takes to create great landscape photography. Primary thing being a heck of a lot of patience, something that I don't usually have for that sort of thing. Revisiting a location like 30 times before it gets the light that you're dreaming of. Pretty not that uncommon with those guys. So yeah, I was doing that, and while I was out there, I was shooting with that new Lumix GH4, which was a blast. That's a really fun camera to work with. I know you took one to Paris with you, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I'm in love with that camera. I mean, I love my GH3, but that GH4, man, it's insane. Yeah.
It's a thing of beauty.
So you were shooting landscapes with the GH4, man. How did that work out?
Great. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring that was because of the expanded dynamic range. All the reports with the DxO reports that we were talking about on the show a couple weeks ago, of getting a full stop more dynamic range than the 5D Canon 5D Mark III. And it was interesting to sit there with the raw files and push that histogram back and forth and see just how much data was there. It's impressive.
Yeah, it is crazy. And I want to apologize to the listeners. It looks like we're having some delays or something with Google Hangouts today. It's not our bandwidth. It is something other than that. But we're going to press on and see if we can get this show in the can, because this is a pretty important show because of the Aperture news. So we're gonna make it happen. Before we jump into the Aperture news, which is obviously our story number 1 this week, I want to thank our sponsors for this episode of This Week in Photo, and that's our friends over at lynda.com. Okay, guys, let's jump into this. So I'm going to read this blurb that Bruce put in the show notes for us. So he's been in here basically a few weeks ago at WWDC. That's Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. Apple announced Yosemite, their next major operating system update, along with this new OS. Apple revealed, they didn't release it yet, they revealed a new Photos application that will replace iPhoto. Well, now it looks like the new Photos app will also be doing the Pac-Man thing on Aperture as well. And Apple has announced this week that they're going to cease further development or continue to cease further development on their photo management editing application that was popular with many professional photographers. So the update will be released so that Aperture will run on Yosemite, but further development, like we said, is going to be discontinued, and they're going to provide upgrade paths for users who want to migrate their Aperture libraries over to the new Photos app. And and the rest we don't know. So it's just kind of up in the air, which is the reason why we have this panel on the show. So let's kick it off with the Aperture expert himself, the man who runs the currently named ApertureExpert.com. Joseph Linaschke, you wrote an excellent blog post. In my opinion, this was a post that Apple should have written, right? So this was a calm yourselves down, people. The sky is not falling. It's all going to be okay post, and this is what Photos means to you Aperture users and what it doesn't mean. Can you kick this discussion off with a demystification of what this demise of Aperture means? Are people's libraries suddenly going to vanish off the face of their hard drives, or what? Tell us the real deal.
I think so, based off of some of the reactions. At the crux of it, no, your library is keep calm and carry on shooting moments where people are just smoke. And Aperture is going, as you said, is going to be updated. There's going to be a minimum of a year and 3 or 4 months of working with the current up-to-date operating system with Aperture being fully functional. At that point, even if you decided to do nothing and just keep moving with Aperture, that doesn't many years to come after that. You may not be able to upgrade to the latest operating system, but you would be able to keep on using it. So worst case scenario, do nothing, continue to use Aperture until whatever Mac you're running on goes up in a puff of smoke, which is going to be many years from now. So that's the first stop. So no panic necessary.
But then the question becomes, Joseph, yeah, that's great. They're ceasing development on Aperture, but camera manufacturers will continue to release new cameras with their corresponding RAW formats.
Sure. What does that mean? RAW support has always been supported by the operating system, not by Aperture itself. So OS X continues to update its RAW support because it needs that RAW support for iPhoto currently, for the new Photos app, and even for Preview or just in the Finder when you hit the spacebar on a file and it opens up and you see it. If it's a RAW file, it's decoding that, and that's all handled by the operating system. So new camera buyers, no need to worry. That's all still going to be there. So then as far as what Photos is going to be, it's pretty clear that it's a totally new app. It's not likely to have all the features that we have come to know and love in version 1. It is likely to take some time before it matures into an app that has the features that we have today and expect today, and then of course all the features that we want. So that may take some time. What that means, if it's another 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 years, nobody knows that. Only Apple can answer that question. And the easiest correlation is to look at the transition to Final Cut. When Final Cut went from Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10, that was a major transition. And at first, Final Cut Pro 10 was not everything that Final Cut Pro 7 was. And unfortunately, back then, Apple handled that pretty poorly. Basically, they launched Final Cut Pro 10 and said all pros switch to this, and they stopped selling 7, and people freaked out because it didn't have the features they need. So this is being handled much better. It's a slow transition. You've got a minimum of a year and change to make the transition, and really more than that if you need it. And you'll be able to continue using what you've got, and when Photos is ready for your workflow, you'll be able to move into it. And that's essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah, lots of questions around that, though. I mean, and Derrick, I want to throw this to you, and Don, I want to have you chime in as well. So with this shift from Apple, a lot of folks are saying, and Derrick, I know you're an authority on this as well. You've written several books on Aperture. You do Linda training on Aperture, and you've been waving the flag for years. So you know, if anybody's impacted by this, it's you. So when you see this,
got a lot of photos in there.
You got a lot of photos in there too. Does this mean, is this Apple signaling the, you know, sort of, okay, Adobe, re-surrender the pro market to you. You guys take it and run with it, and we're going to go after the consumer market?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think that's a fair question concerning the pro market. I think above that is this is a reboot of photography on the Apple platform. You know, they wanted to do some stuff. They want integration. So they want iCloud and iOS and OS X to be seamless in terms of how these technologies work together. And my guess is what they did was when they sat down and they looked at all the apps and they looked at where they were going with OS X and iOS, they said, well, we could probably patch iPhoto and Aperture to some degree, or we could write a new app from the ground up and just, you know, move forward that way and, you know, take the hit. And I think that's what they decided to do. And, you know, one of the things on the con list was, you know, serious enthusiasts and pros would be upset by this move initially. As Joseph said, we'll see what happens 2 years up the road. But, you know, initially V1 is not going to be, you know, Aperture 3.5. So, you know, there's those guys are going to be upset about that.
Yeah, but you know, when I look at it from a consumer perspective, in that time, since the announcement dropped, and Joseph, you wrote that blog post and all that, and, you know, if I was even considering using Aperture, I wouldn't be buying it, obviously, and I'd be looking for, you know, I'd be looking for a life raft of, okay, you know, Apple's not supporting this stuff anymore. They're not serious about pro photography. What else is out there? Obviously, all arrows are going to point to Lightroom. Are we going to just see a flood of Mac users just saying, you know what, Apple, you're doing that Final Cut thing again. You're doing that motion thing again. You're doing that, you know, Soundtrack Pro thing again, and abandoning software. I'm going over Adobe because they've been towing the line all along. You know, but is this the argument?
There's one point there. They're changing software, but they're not abandoning the library. Now, they rewrote the library structure back a few versions ago, intermediate versions ago, when they unified iPhoto and Aperture library. So that was kind of a first step. The library that we all have, or the libraries that we all have, will work moving forward. So, you know, the structure that you have, the metadata, the image edits, all that stuff that's in there, that works moving forward into Yosemite and to the Photos app and all that. So what they're abandoning is, you know, is the shell app, not the core structure. So just to be clear on what, you know, what's happening with that. Now, the second part of your question, yeah, a whole bunch of people are going to go to Lightroom because there's a lot of folks that they are just not going to wait for this to play out, and they're going to move right now. And I would say, and we'll see what Don has to say about this, but I would say if you're going to move to Lightroom, I would still wait, because I would suspect that Adobe is trying to probably figure out some way to ease the migration from Aperture to Lightroom. And so I would kind of want to wait and see what that looked like, because right now it's a real pain in the toe to do that. And, you know, hopefully Adobe can come up with something that's a bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if, you know, not speaking with any inside information, but if I was Adobe, I would be looking, you know, previous to this, I'm sure it was kind of a touchy subject. You don't want to, you know, piss off the competition by making it really easy for their library to be read into yours. Now the competition is thrown in the flag, you know, the white flag. So, okay, let's bring that library in. Don, what about you? I know you're on Windows, and I'm not sure what your post-processing workflow is. Have you, you know, and I know you haven't used Aperture, right? So what do you think about this whole thing?
Okay, well, a few things. I am on Windows, and I use Lightroom and Photoshop sort of concurrently. An image will always end up, you know, round-tripping at least once into Photoshop for whatever I need. But I'm worried because there's no competition now. There's no direct competition to Lightroom, so there's no reason for Adobe to put a lot of money and engineering efforts into making Lightroom even better. If they're at the top of the game and there's nothing nipping at their heels, why are they going to improve, and why are they going to need to revolutionize their processing structure and introduce new technologies if it doesn't make them any more money,
Right.
and it doesn't gain them any new audience? So I'm kind of worried about that. And from my perspective, I mean, I've never used Aperture, and I never intended on it. I think that this will be something of an exodus from Apple, photographers. Not necessarily that they're going to go out and buy a PC, but they're going to look for other software. It's weird though, because Apple, that just last year they announced the new Mac Pros, and you can get a fully decked out Mac Pro for just almost $10,000. I mean, they have hardware there for the pros, and it just seems to be going in the opposite direction now that they're getting rid of any of the software that would also support that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense from the standpoint of, hey, you skate to where the puck's going to be, right? And the money is in the consumer space, and they have more money, arguably, than any tech company on the planet, right? So clearly they're doing something right with the decisions that they're making. And like they showed with Final Cut, they're not afraid to piss off a small minority of pro users, right? To satisfy, if it means satisfying a gigantic, rabid, money-wielding crowd of consumers, who cares about the vocal pros over there, right? So,
well,
Joseph,
we are the vocal pros. So,
yeah.
I mean, this is our soapbox, I suppose. And while we are not the majority, and there's a lot of people that this is going to upset. That clearly, I can see the rage in many people's eyes right now.
Yeah. Joseph, does this open the window? Like Don brought up a good point about competition, and that crossed my mind as well. Like Adobe can clearly ease off the gas now, right? Because there's nobody in their rear view. So even if Aperture was on the horizon in their rear view, now there's nobody in their rear view. So does this open the door for some innovative company or third party to just, not only build the migration software, which Adobe arguably should be doing, but to create a competitor to Lightroom and kind of build that Aperture 5 or 6 to compete directly with Lightroom?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Why not? It certainly could happen. It's not like that kind of software gets developed overnight, though. But I think that the real competition for Adobe on that in the Lightroom space isn't necessarily going to be, it's there's nothing else out there. It's just now we get to wait until Photos matures to that point. It's more the architecture of what Photos is going to be built on.
Yeah.
So if we look at excuse me, and some of this is speculation, but this is really kind of obvious speculation. If we look at iOS 8, the entire photo library structure is built off something called PhotoKit. PhotoKit is accessible by any third party as what they call a first-class citizen now. Unlike in previous iOS versions where if you had, say, something like Snapseed, right, you had the access to pull a photo out of the Photos library on iOS, do your work with it, and then send it back again. But if you wanted to maintain any type of editability, you had to keep it in your own space, in your own library. So with iOS 8 and PhotoKit, all of that changes. Every app has the same access to the Photos library as Apple's own apps do. Now, if you take that onto OS 10, which is a clear indication of where things are going, Photos app for OS 10 for Yosemite is built into the OS level. It's a very, very deeply integrated piece of the puzzle. So suddenly, what this opens up, and again, this is speculation, but the possibilities here of what this opens up is that now third-party apps, just like on iOS, can be built for OS 10 that access the photos at the operating system level. Photos.app, if you decide you don't like it, it doesn't have enough features for you, whatever, anybody in theory should be able to make a program that they don't have to worry about the digital asset management part of it. They don't have to worry about content management. That is handled by Photos.app, and they can just on top of it. So that plugin/app could be an entire editing suite. It could be anything. It could be anything from a 99-cent really cool curves tool that just gets plugged into it versus a $1,000 massive editing tool that nobody's ever dreamed of before. And so that by taking away that whole file management part of it, it frees up the developers to work on the cool stuff and leave the hard work of the file management to Apple. And I think
Interesting. So this means
that is where the real competition is going to hit.
This if what you say comes to fruition, and Derrick, please jump in on this too. This means that Lightroom could arguably be looking at, in a year, 18 months or so, a completely radical rewrite to just look at that photo library that Apple has kind of laid out and put on a silver platter for them, right?
They absolutely could do that, and then it goes beyond. I think Joseph articulated that really well, and then it goes beyond that. It's not just what sits on the Mac. It's also, remember, iPhoto for iOS is going away also, and then they've wanted to leverage iCloud in a more serious way for photographers. So in addition to everything that Joseph talked about, then you're also looking at integration on your iPad, your iPhone, and then cloud storage. So this gets big and interesting really fast.
Yes, it does, and it's becoming clearer. This conversation is making this become clearer. And Don, would you chime in on this next part, because it's one of the stories that we're going to be talking about, or that we can talk about now, actually, is the fact that Google added non-destructive editing to Google Plus Photos now. So we're clearly seeing things move into the cloud. Google is ahead of the game there. I mean, they've been playing in the cloud forever, and they acquired Nik and Snapseed and all that stuff, and they've been doubling down on cloud-based processing. Is this where things are going now, Don? Do you see the arrow pointing in that direction, where ultimately your library is going to live in the cloud?
I think the foundation is certainly being built in that direction, and Google, like you said, they've been doing it for years. They've been gathering all these little pieces to some greater picture, and I think that this non-destructive editing is going to be a big part of that. I think they announced that the next Android operating system is going to allow for full RAW support, and so that's another piece of the puzzle that's continuing. And these are all stepping stones that I don't know what Google is going to create for photographers. I don't think it's there now, and I think that moving it into the cloud is great for some people. Not great for me because of the volume of work that I do, and the fact that right now at least none of my cameras have an internet connection directly on them. When that happens, I mean, who knows what the technology will be able to embrace with photography? It's a constantly flowing market, and it's great that Apple is, by the sounds of it, they're completely re-envisioning things, and Google is stepping up to the plate as well, and I'm kind of excited to see where the next 5 years in photography is going to be, because nobody can really predict it at this point, and that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So Derrick and Joseph, the piece that kind of, and this was a comment, what I'm about to say was a comment that was left on, I don't know, I think it was either your post or my reposting of your post, Joseph, or something, but somebody brought up the fact that, hey, I'm a pro user and I understand the logic behind this shift into cloud-based processing. However, I shoot RAW, and how the heck am I going to get all my RAW files up in the cloud? I don't want all my RAW data in the cloud. What's that utopian future? I mean, are they thinking everyone's going to have 50 megabits upload speeds, or what?
Well,
Derrick, go ahead, you take it. Or Joseph, whoever.
Joseph, you go. Then I'll chime in after you, Joseph.
Cool. So yeah, unless everybody's going to have gigabit connections and unlimited free storage online, then clearly that's not going to happen. And this is unfortunately one of the biggest bits of misinformation that's out there about this shift. Apple talks about iCloud storage. They demoed iCloud storage. They showed how cool it is that you'll be able to sync your photos across, make a change on your iPad, it shows up on your, in photos on your iPad, it shows up in photos on your desktop instantly. Yeah. Wicked cool. Nowhere in there did Apple ever say you will be required to host your entire library in the cloud. Yet somehow the internet decided that that is what they said. And somehow the internet decided that they're going to go on and on about how Apple doesn't get it, Apple's stupid, Apple doesn't care about pros, they don't understand that we have terabytes and terabytes of data. And it's quite frankly one of the most ludicrous things I've seen, and I see it over and over again. So to any listener who is freaking out that they can't possibly upgrade their 10 terabyte library, their million photos up to the cloud, no one said you had to. It's just an option. It's an unbelievably cool option. I can't wait to have that capability, but I'm not in a position to be able to put my entire library on the cloud either. And nobody said I was going to have to. I'll put the pieces up there that I want to. Maybe my most recent libraries. Who knows? We don't know how that'll be organized. Maybe you can say put my 5 stars up. We don't know yet. But clearly, you do not have to put your entire library on the cloud.
Yeah. Derrick?
Yes. So, the basis for this technology is already there, and both Adobe and Apple use it. You have your raw file, and then the first thing that both Lightroom and Aperture do is they make a JPEG of it. It's your working file, and as you make edits to your image, what both Adobe and Apple do is they read the raw file, they get that data, then they apply the edit instructions that you make, and then they update the JPEG preview. That JPEG preview is the money that is exchanged across hands, and so anything that happens on the cloud or to your iOS devices or whatever is going to be based on your raw images, but it's not going to be the raw images. It's going to be these JPEGs that are handed around. They're super convenient. They're very high quality. Every time you make an edit, the application goes back, reads the raw file, makes adjustments, and creates a new image. So this is what we're going to be able to hand around. I don't want to hand around raw files. Nobody does. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I would love to have high quality, let's say 2048 JPEGs on any device I pick up, and I go, hey, I need to do an Instagram post. I took a cool shot 2 weeks ago. Boom, there it is, and up it goes. And so it's going to be much more intelligent than a lot of the banter that we're hearing right now.
So, just so I understand how this might work, and again, the mechanics of this are all speculative at this point, right? Aside from what Apple announced. So, just to be clear about that, but could it possibly, based on what Joseph was saying and what he wrote, this being this photo kit type architecture on the Mac that kind of elevates the Photos library to being a citizen that all applications can access, could that theoretically mean that I could use Photos if I wanted to, and I could use the next Lightroom in tandem and tell Photos to, hey, take this folder and put just this folder or my 5 stars or whatever on all my devices, but leave everything else alone, and then I can use Lightroom to manage the rest of my library? Is that theoretically possible in this upcoming world?
Yeah, the thing that we're going to be doing, Joseph, me, and every other guy that makes a living doing what we do here, is we're going to be figuring out all the workarounds, all the workflows, all the cool hacks. I would love to be the guy that comes up with something that's really neat, around that. So I think there's going to be a lot of possibilities, and that's the fun part of it. That's the part I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, let's shift the discussion a little bit to the cloud, because we've been talking about that, and that's the common denominator between these three mega companies: Google, Apple, and Adobe, right? So we've seen, on the Apple side, they've been trying for a while to crack this cloud nut, right? And some would argue unsuccessfully, now more successful than before. They're getting there, but they're clearly committed and putting resources against cracking the cloud nut. On the Google side, by definition, they are the cloud. They're an internet company that exists in the cloud only, but they're making strides in focusing their efforts on Google Plus Photos and making that as awesome and auto-awesome as they can. And then on the Adobe side, we see Creative Cloud, and just the recent announcement of Creative Cloud 2014, they're doubling down on the cloud as well. They just announced the Lightroom mobile. It's now on the iOS devices, both the phone and tablets, and you can store your stuff in the cloud, and share it to different people. All this stuff is going on. The common denominator that I see across all these companies is the cloud. Is that the next frontier? And so it's like the cloud and mobile are primary, with desktop just sort of fading into the distance. Is that what you guys are seeing, or am I reading it wrong?
Well, I think they're all hooked together. I'm not sure. I think mobile is at the top of the list, mobility, and I think the cloud is a means to do that. I don't think the cloud is the end all there. I think it's a way to enable that sort of thing. Lightroom mobile that you mentioned is cool. I'm using it right now, and I like it. and they just added star ratings, and they're doing little goodies along the way, and I think it's going to continue to get better. So yeah, I think they're all trying to figure out what the secret formula is here. The mix of cloud and mobility, but I think mobility is, for me anyway, mobility is at the top of the heap, and the desktop's not going away. Even you need a space station, right? So
Right.
you need something.
Yeah, you need a base to return to every now and then.
You do. You need a harbor, or whatever metaphor we want to use there.
Right. Joseph, you have anything to add to that?
But that's the key, though. That's not everybody does, right? And it's the pros do. The high-end photographers do need that base, whatever it is, back at home, back in the studio. But your average consumer does not. Your average consumer can do just fine with an iPad or a small laptop. But let's just go totally mobile. It's iPad. You've got a digital camera and an iPad. You've got the ability to pull your photos over, edit. The average consumer doesn't need access to the raw file. They don't need all that power. They just want to take the JPEG, make some changes, put a cool filter, crop it, add it to a photo album, add it to their Facebook library, Instagram, whatever. And that's perfectly enough for the vast majority of users. So you don't necessarily need that big power, but those of us that do, of course, we'll always be there. But it's less and less important than it used to be.
Don, is this stuff important? I mean, what's your flow? I mean, when you talk about mobile, cloud, desktop, which do you care about least and which is most?
Well, I want to echo both Joseph and Derrick's statements about the vast majority of people that are embracing this mobile technology. They are the consumers. They are the people that are not professionals, that might not even call themselves photographers, but they like to take pictures with their devices, share them, edit them, post them around, and I think that all of these companies are trying to cater to that vast majority and make that a better experience. Some of those conveniences, if they can trickle down to a professional's workflow and improve your ability to access your images from anywhere at any time, in some of the ways that Derrick was explaining, that's fantastic. But I don't know if that's going to be a world-changing piece of technology for a lot of photographers. It might help and it might enhance things, but I don't think that it's going to revolutionize anything. It will revolutionize the consumer space, where people can take pictures with any Wi-Fi connected point-and-shoot camera, cell phone, mirrorless camera, and have just the images without massive amounts of raw data, and have that on every device, editing in any way that they want and shared in any way that they want. And that's becoming something of a singularity, where as soon as you can pick up any device and have all of your pictures, regardless of who it's from, then I think that we're in a different world of photography and really a different world of communication.
Yeah, the other thing I worry about is this the privacy. So once you start relying on the cloud, there's two things: there's privacy and reliability. Because if you're living off the cloud and that is your primary mode of connecting to your library and all this other stuff, and you now don't have internet access for some reason, yeah, of course you're going to have cached copies, but still you're going to have diminished access. There's that piece of it, and then the other piece of it is, the tinfoil hat people are going to say, hey, I don't want all my data in the cloud. Like in the case of Google, if I put all my photos on Google, they're going to do image recognition and facial recognition on my photos and serve me ads based on the photos content.
I think it's almost.
Go ahead, Don.
It's almost impossible to consider anything private these days. It's one of those things that I wish we could have privacy online, but I don't think we could sort of live our lives expecting it anymore these days.
Right. That's sad. That's a little scary.
It is.
If you want privacy, stay offline.
Yeah. I don't think that'll help. Because as we talked about in a previous TWiP, people can take photos of you from the street inside your house and do gallery exhibitions and be okay with it. I don't know. Derrick, what do you think about the cloud privacy piece of it?
So that ship has sailed a long time ago. I mean, I know that people don't even realize. You go onto any website and you've got 18 different spiders crawling all over you at any given moment. There is no privacy if you're online, if you're using any of this, and that's just the way it is. We'll have to see how it shakes out. I'm more concerned about what you were talking about earlier, which is reliability. Mm-hmm. Because that is a real issue for me. I travel a lot, and I still have the same work to do every day, regardless if I'm here in my studio or if I'm in London. And having that reliability problem is, that's what drives me nuts, and that's the part I hate about the cloud. So I was just testing a new app today called Shutter for iOS, and they do one clever thing. Everything gets automatically backed up. You have unlimited cloud storage, but they keep the last 200 photos that you take with it, on your device. They keep it local. So there's always, and they know that we run into reliability issues.
Yeah.
So that's the part I hate. Privacy.
Forget about it. You're like, forget about it.
Forget about it, man. It's it's too late.
All right. Well, we've beat this to death a little bit, I think. It's obviously the story is going to continue to unfold as the features that are going to be in Photos app reveal themselves. Any final words on the Aperture sort of news there, Joseph? And piggyback on that, when can we expect some training from you on your site on all of this stuff and migratory paths and all this?
Sure. Well, the primary takeaway for the whole Aperture thing is what I opened it with. Keep calm and carry on shooting. It's not the end of the world. Transitions take time, and just because Apple announced that it wasn't going to be developed anymore doesn't mean that you all have to run out and switch over to something tomorrow. So take your time, figure out what you want to do. Nothing's been taken away from you. So there's that part of it. As far as transitions, ApertureExpert.com clearly needs to be rethought, rethunk, rebranded, redone. And I've got lots of ideas of what that's going to be. I haven't made any final decisions yet, but I have registered at least a dozen new URLs for possible new business ventures with it. But it will be continue to be at its core what it always has been, whether it supports just photos or it goes a little bigger than that remains to be seen. And the next major step for Aperture Expert is clearly going to be to help Aperture users do whatever it is they need to do. I'm not going to sit there and say, don't go to Lightroom, because obviously for a lot of photographers that is the logical and the correct choice to make. And they're going to make it. So we're going to have to help them out with that. So that's what we're going to do. We will work on a strategy, work on a workflow that people can follow to get their pictures over to Aperture, over to Lightroom as cleanly as possible. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty, but we're going to put some real time and effort into figuring out what the best way to do that is and publish that as ebooks, videos, whatever it may be, and get that information out there.
I love it. Yeah, the metaphor is, today's big news about General Motors, recalling what 28 million vehicles or something unprecedented like that. This is not that, right? So it's not like, Aperture is being recalled and you're left high and dry with your libraries. You can still drive your car, people. It's okay. So,
well, it's not only in the big picture. Not only is it not that, it's not even Final Cut 10. And I think that that mishandling of Final Cut 10, and boy was it mishandled. Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with what people are feeling right now.
Yeah. So Derrick, I'll put the same question to you. Final thoughts on the Aperture thing, and like I said at the beginning, you've got Linda titles out there, you've got books out there that you've committed a sizable amount of time training people on Aperture. When can we expect some Photos app? I mean, obviously, when the Photos app hits, you can do that. But anything in the interim on massaging the transition and all that?
Well, I mean, it's so funny. The morning before all of this happened, I woke up at 5 in the morning and said, I need to talk to Linda about Photos, and Yosemite, because I just feel like we're going to have to start working on that soon. And literally 2 hours later, I get a call from Apple PR about the Aperture thing. So so we already put, the wheels are already in motion. I think what Linda and Joseph and everyone else needs to figure out is, what's the best way to proceed, in terms of that. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to be busy. Joseph's going to be busy. A lot of us going to be busy over the next year, and in all honesty, that's not such a terrible thing.
No, that's a great thing. I mean,
Yeah.
now, no more grasping for straws and crumbs, worrying about the Aperture release. Now there's at least a line in the sand that something cool is coming, and you can start thinking and planning
Yeah,
for
I
it.
mean, you said it yourself at the top of the show. Aperture, they just officially said that they were going to stop updating Aperture. It's unofficially been going on for a long time.
I know. Yeah, I'm just sad because I can't tease you guys anymore, man. I mean,
There'll be something new. There'll be something. You'll find something.
You'll find
oh
something,
yes,
exactly.
I will. Yes, I will. All right, guys, let's move on to story number 3. This is about Nikon. So, Nikon announced the D18 in this new camera. This is sort of follow up to its megapixel beast, the D800. It's got a brand new 36.3 megapixel FX format, and that's 7,360 by 4912 resolution on a CMOS sensor, which is just, I can't get my brain around those numbers. No optical low-pass filter, improved image detail and dynamic range, new highlight-weighted metering to help prevent blown-out highlights. It's got HDMI output for video, allowing for uncompressed video to be recorded on an external recorder. No word about 4K. And it's got a street price of $3,300. Don Komarechka, I know you might be looking at this camera. I don't know. You're a Canon guy. But what do you think about these specs? Does this make you want to jump?
Well, you see, I'm a Canon guy, but Canon hasn't been getting any love in the high megapixel market. I mean, this is Nikon's second generation 36 megapixel digital SLR, and Canon has nothing that can really compete. And it's interesting to see how they're pushing things forward. The no optical low pass filter is interesting. I was digging through a box of stuff that I have here, and for those that are watching the video, if not, I'll describe it audibly. This is a sensor from a Nikon D4. And so if you take this apart, there's one piece of glass, and then you take some other pieces apart,
Jeez.
and there's another piece of glass, and you take something else apart, and on the sensor itself there's another piece of glass. So there's 3 pieces of glass inside of a sensor, and I'm sure that creates some optical muck along the way, no matter how well engineered it is. So removing that and what it represents, the anti-aliasing filters and all of that kind of stuff too, will conceivably produce a sharper image, and you might get some interesting results from that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to be revolutionary. It's not going to change the world, but it could offer some advantage to those photographers that really want to get the most out of every pixel that's there.
Yeah.
One interesting point to mention, and I can't figure this out though. I was looking through all the specs changes, the differences between the D800 and the D810, and a lot of it seems software based. They have the exact same metering hardware, but they're introducing new metering modes. And like the intervalometer has been increased from 999 exposures to adding an extra digit to 9,999. And I'm thinking, these kinds of things, these are firmware updates.
That's code. Yeah.
This is code. This is really going to annoy the D800 owners out there that have all this hardware that can't use any of these features, even though it's fully possible. Just Nikon decided not to include it in the older version. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Oh, can you imagine that? I could see some boss over at Nikon saying, you know what, you have X dollars to make this next version better. Make it stretch. I want some bullet points on that spec sheet. I don't care how you do it, but make it happen with $10,000. All you got. I don't know, Joseph. You saw the specs on this thing, and I know you've been playing around with that GH4. And you used to shoot big cameras. What'd you think of this? Was it exciting, or were you like me?
Me. It's easy to get all caught up in the megapixels, and the megapixel wars we thought were over, and then Nikon went and stoked the fire again with that.
Yeah.
Cameras like the GH4, and granted it's a smaller sensor, but that is a 16 megapixel file that you get out of that, not a 36 megapixel file. So that's a massive difference.
Yeah.
36 megapixels, I would never say, oh, it's too many pixels, what are you going to do with that? Because clearly there's a time and a space for it. In my mind, if I'm going to shoot something that's that many megapixels, then I probably want to go medium format. I don't really have an interest in trying to cram that many megapixels into a full-frame sensor. It's just a lot. Now, I'm saying that I haven't shot with it, so maybe I would be blown away with it, but I'm certainly not about to go out and invest any real time and energy into it. I'm loving what I've got now. That camera, I would imagine, weighs a little bit more than than the GH4. That's one of the reasons I started going that route, was to get that nice lightweight kit. And Derrick, that's your fault. You're the one who turned me on to this whole Micro Four Thirds thing.
I know. It's so cool. I love seeing this, that you're going with the GH4. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fantastic setup.
I mean, and so it's Derrick, it's your fault. I mean, because Joseph kind of influenced me to move into Micro Four Thirds, so it's kind of your fault that I'm that I moved to Micro Four Thirds. So thank you, Father Derrick.
Yeah, well, you know, spouses hate me for this very reason.
So what did you think of? You saw the specs of this thing. You know, ordinarily back when I was using Nikon and actively shooting, I would have been poring over that website, and my pupils would have changed to hearts, and I would have been crunching numbers to see how could I make it happen. Now I saw that, I haven't even read I haven't gone to the site yet. I'm like, okay, I'll go check it out later. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's the big hammer, right? So I think Don was sort of alluding to this well, is that when you need it. When you need this camera for a particular type of work that you're doing or a particular job, then it's great, right? And I think this camera is going to do that high-end work very well. I guess the way that they're also going to solve the Moiré pattern is through software too. They're going to, they're not offering anti-alias and non-anti-alias filter models. They're just going to go without it, and then get rid of the Moiré through software. That's what I'm reading. I haven't seen that yet. So I think it's a cool camera if you need it. If you don't need it, it's expensive and it's very big. And I was just thinking the other day, I still have about 6 jobs a year where I need my heavy-duty big DSLRs, and I'm really glad I have them then. And the rest of the time, you guys are shooting the Panasonic, I'm shooting the Olympus, and I'm just loving it. I mean, I went all through Europe with the EM10. Yeah. I love my pictures, and I had a great time, So it's the right tool for the job, and for some jobs, that new Nikon is going to be the right tool.
Yeah, like landscape shooters. I was talking to Karen Hutton, and she, obviously is a big landscape shooter, and she needs those pixels because she's printing ginormous prints that you need to resolve the detail down to the ant. From with a wide angle lens. So she needs that, and it makes sense for the Karens. And what I told Karen was, camera manufacturers like Nikon love her, and they wish were all her. But unfortunately, we're not all her. No. We're okay with not seeing that ant, at life size from a mile away. So.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to Don. I'm a Canon shooter too. And I haven't upgraded from the 5D Mark II for my full-frame sensor, because I haven't had to. That camera is still doing what I need it to do for what I need when I need a full-frame sensor. So they probably don't like me either, because I'm fine. I've got glass, I've got a nice sensor. I'm sitting pretty when I need that camera.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just exciting. All
Derrick,
this stuff's
I'm curious.
coming out.
What is it that you need the?
Go ahead, Joseph.
Sorry, we got that delay.
Well,
Derrick, what is it you need the full-frame sensor for on those few jobs?
I still do some commercial work that ends up on billboards and things like that. So on those shoots, I feel, and maybe it's just a safety net thing, I just feel more comfortable using the full-frame sensor with a few more pixels. And I don't know, I still trust that dynamic range, although the dynamic range on my Micro Four Thirds has been amazing lately. Yeah. But it's the stuff that goes big.
Yeah.
And and the other thing too, when you, and this is so silly, but it's still a little bit true, when you're getting paid, let's say $10,000 for a shoot, right? Yeah. And you show up and you got the art director there and everything. I'm still not comfortable showing up with a Micro Four Thirds. I still feel like I need to show up with a big camera, at least until the check clears.
Yeah, that's what I keep telling. I think it's TWiP listeners, here's a business idea for you. You know how they have underwater housings? build
I know where you're going.
This crazy looking DSLR housing for your Micro Four Thirds camera, and you're good,
I love it. I
Funny.
love it. I'll be first in line. Kickstarter.
Exactly. That's $1 million idea. You can walk around looking like, a real photographer with your
That's what I
with your
need. That's what I need.
All right, guys. Let's jump into the listener Q&A. This is the segment where our listeners get to pose a question and we answer it. This week's question comes from Ron Stevenson via our Google Plus community page. He says, I'm considering purchasing a mirrorless camera kit selling for under $1,000. Would appreciate any suggestions. Derrick, what do you think? Under a grand, what can Ron get into?
Yeah, this is good. We got a good panel for this because we'll get a couple different recommendations. The one that I'm going to go with right now, that I feel really good about, is the Olympus OMD EM10.
Yeah.
That kit is $799 with the lens, and you still got a little bit of money left over to get a 45 f1.8 or something, fun there.
Yeah.
So that's what I would go with right now.
And the EM10. Yeah, I think I'd probably agree with you. I'd say either that one or the Panasonic GM1. It's the little one, but it depends on what he's using. The other piece of this, what are you using the camera for? So there's lots of different sizes.
You get the electronic viewfinder, with the EM10. That's really nice.
Yeah, and does the EM10 have that 5-axis image stabilization?
3.
Only 3-axis, okay. That's
3-axis, yeah. But
only
you get
3. Listen to us. Only 3.
How many does the Canon have again?
It doesn't stabilize the time dimension,
But that's right. And the only place that you really notice it is for macro work. That in and out is where it gives up. But you gain a pop-up flash, which you haven't had on the OMDs prior. So
cool.
there's a. But the one thing I will say, and I think I know Frederick, you probably go along with it. Whatever you get, make sure it has good Wi-Fi built in and a companion app, because that just changes everything in terms of on-the-go workflow.
Totally, yeah. And you kicked me over the edge on that. Remember that time we met in San Francisco, and we were I think it was your iPad for Photographers book we were talking about, and you were demonstrating the wireless workflow, and I was like, it's that easy? And since then, it's become part of my regular sort of MO. Shoot, find it, put it on the phone, and send it out after some editing.
It's so fun.
I'm addicted.
Yeah.
Don, what about you? You have any thoughts on that? On the sub $1,000 mirrorless?
I've yet to dive into the market myself, but I've got my hands on quite a few of them. And one that I really quite liked was the Sony Alpha 6000, which again clocks in at pretty much the exact same price that Derrick was saying, about $800 with the kit lens. And that gives you the room if you want to buy a second lens or any extra accessories to fully kit yourself out. And it's not the Micro Four Thirds. It's Sony's E-mount lenses, and it's an APS-C-sized sensor, so it's slightly bigger. Not sure if that's an advantage. The camera is still physically about the same size, I think. I've heard nothing but great things. My hands-on experience, however brief it was pretty fantastic as well. So I'd consider that one.
Yeah, great point. A couple of people on the workshop, Valerie's workshop in Paris, had the A6000, and they were like. And they had just gotten them because it's a relatively new camera, and they were over the moon. They were just blown away at the quality. I mean, they were like, it's hard to not nail a shot with this thing. They're like walking around with it one hand, like, oh, people having toast, click, and they get it. Firing the frame per second rate of that thing is like a machine gun on caffeine. It's just. In every shot is sharp. It's just amazing. It's an amazing little under-marketed and undersold camera, I think. So, and we did a review of that camera on the All About the Gear show. Doug Kay and I did a review of it. Actually, Doug did the review, and I asked him questions about it. So, check out This Week in Photo. Just do a search for A6000, and you'll find that review. It's a video review. Joseph, what about you? What do you think? What's a good sub 1K camera?
Sure. Well, that GM1 you mentioned is great, but like Derrick said, it doesn't have the electronic viewfinder. So if you want that, what I would say is go for the GX7. That's also Lumix camera, the GX7, and that's the same price point. It's about $1,000 with a kit lens, and that's it's a nice little zoom, and that is a really, really great camera. Oh, there we go. Hold that baby up.
There's a GX7.
That is a wonderful piece of kit. I love this, and for those watching, show the pop-up of the tiltable viewfinder.
Oh yeah, so
Here, get it back. Let's see the
viewfinder.
tiltable viewfinder.
Oh, the tiltable viewfinder. There's the LCD, and there's the viewfinder like that. Look at that.
Super cool.
Look at that.
Yes,
and a
you can
pop-up
hold
flash.
the camera.
Woo, look at that.
Waist level, but you look straight down into it. It's a very cool little camera. Great Wi-Fi control. Same thing that Derrick was talking about. You can control that thing from your iPad, trigger it, change the exposure, whatever. Look through the viewfinder from your iPad. It's incredible. That would be my $1,000 Micro Four Thirds kit of choice. I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful.
The price on that one came down, so it came down into the range there because it was a more expensive camera, and it's an excellent camera. And I have to agree with the A6000 too. I mean, these cameras that we're talking about right now, I would say this is what photography is about right now. These are amazing tools.
Yeah, and it's only getting better. I mean, we've got amazing tools on the capture side, and like we kicked the show off with, we're not seeing stagnation, well, not anymore, on the post-processing. I'm trying to hold back. I'm trying. On the post-processing and digital asset management side, there's movement there now as well. There's life. So I'm happy. Yeah, we're doing good. I think it's a good time to be a photographer. All right, guys, let's jump into the pick of the week segment. This is the part where you guys get to mention something, recommend something to the This Week in Photo audience. Derrick Story, I'm going to let you go first. What's your pick of the week?
I'm going to pick my little red Me Photo Day Trip tripod that I was carrying in Europe.
I have that. That's what I brought to Europe too. I love it.
So it was so nice. It fit in my messenger bag. The one thing you have to caution people is that it only goes up about 2.5 feet. I have the small one, about 2.5 feet, but I never had a problem with it. I always found something to use it, to put it on, and it is so rock solid. It's light. It's got a mini Arca Swiss head. It's a good little kit, and it's not that bad. It was I think 149 or something.
Yeah, I think that's what I think I picked it up at PPI, and I paid the show price for it. It was something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a terrific. People leave tripods at home because they're too big and too heavy. This one you can take with you. It's quality, and it's very solid.
Yeah, that's a good point because we were in Paris, roaming around at night, getting night shots and doing long exposures and that sort of thing. And, a couple of people forgot their tripods or didn't bring them. In fact, one lady said that, I thought about bringing my tripod, but I brought extra shoes instead. What?
So she like put the camera on the shoe? How does that work?
But I mean, she's an awesome photographer. And then she was regretting it because we were doing so much walking. She only ended up using her comfortable shoes the entire time. So those shoes just got a free trip across the Atlantic.
Yeah, it's funny. The very first serious shot I took with that Me Photo was in San Francisco at Pier 14 of the Bay Bridge and everything. Yeah. And I put it on Flickr, and it blew up on Explore and just had. It just went crazy. I had a great, and I go, this is the way you start out a relationship with a tripod. This is so.
That just means it's all downhill from there, Derrick. You can't start out on a high note. Set the bar too high, man. You gotta, start with dinner or something. Come on. Awesome. All right, Derrick. Thanks for that. That's the Me Photo. What was that? The Me Photo Day Trip.
The Day Trip. So it's a little. If you need one a little bit bigger, they have.
Road Trip. I think I have the Road Trip.
The Road Trip is the next size up. Yeah.
Yeah. And that one, it's in front of me. It goes up to. You have to look at the specs on the page, but it's got to go up to at least 5 feet or something like that.
Yeah, that one goes up a bigger notch. Yep.
Yeah. The only thing that the detractor that I found that came into stark contrast in Paris was on this particular, the one I'm pointing at, the Road Trip, too many segments in the legs. Too many, because there's like 1, 2, 4 4 little things that you have to undo to extend the leg, and that's 12, that you have to do just to get your tripod at its full height. And doing that a couple hundred times was old. I was wishing for the little latch. Remember the tripods that have the latch to release the legs? That's what I need.
Well, I have a very dramatic way to do that. Now, mine doesn't have as many, but what I do is I loosen them all up while it's upside down, and then I dramatically turn it, and they frump, and they all go out, and then I just tighten them all down.
Nice.
So it's a little showmanship too.
Maybe you should do a YouTube video on that. That feels like a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Emergency tripod deployment by Derrick Stewart. All right, well, cool. Thanks, Derrick. Don Komarechka, what's your pick?
The tripod, put it away. Don't tighten up the leg. Just open them, collapse it, and then stick it in the bag. You don't need to retighten them. And then when you take it out of the bag, they're already loose. Shake and lock.
But see, I don't know if that'd work for me, Joseph, because I'm anal retentive. So I would have to make sure they all have to be perfect and aligned correctly before I stow it. It's military. Come on.
Frederick's like tossing and turning in bed. Oh God, should I just get up and tighten them?
There's one segment that's not tight. I know it. Hey, you laugh. Sickness is nothing to laugh at. Come on. All right, Don, what do you got for us? What's your pick of the week?
Well, it's something of a household item that I've repurposed for photography on a number of occasions. I was out teaching a macro photography workshop last weekend, and it was an invaluable piece of my kit. It happens to be your just standard black umbrella.
Ooh.
And so, I mean, something you should keep in your car all the time just in case it rains. But fully extended, that becomes, on a macro scale, when you're photographing wildflowers or anything close to the ground, it becomes a great light diffuser, and it actually blocks a lot of the light if you're trying to use flash and be creative in that way. You can go and buy photographic quality diffusers and light blockers and reflectors and all that kind of stuff, and then you have to worry about unfolding them and getting a stand. And the umbrella, just get one with a long handle, and it makes itself its own stand, and so it's very convenient and far less expensive than any alternatives. If you want just soft light, a white umbrella. If you want to play with flash, a black one, and you're all set.
And where did you pick that thing up from? Amazon?
Well, I mean, just any hardware store or pharmacy
this is
or
a
anything.
Standard one.
This is just a standard. This is an umbrella. Nothing fancy about it. It's just either black or white, so that you have neutral colors.
Nice. Very cool. All right. Good tip. There you go. And that's a little cheaper than Derrick's. Let's see if Joseph, can you beat that?
Everyone's always cheaper than mine.
Not on the cheaper. I'm going to go the other direction.
Yeah, go for it.
So we talked about the GH4, somebody's pick of the week. So I'm not going to pick the camera, but I'm going to pick a lens to go along with it. And that is the new Lumix 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 lens. So on a Micro Four Thirds, you double it, so that's your standard 24 to 70 f2.8. And that lens is sharp.
Yes, it's crazy sharp.
Derrick,
that's the lens
nice.
I shot the Eiffel Tower.
It is.
Yeah, I have that lens too. I use that lens also.
Yeah, I'm not normally a huge fan of zooms. Yeah, I love a bag full of small primes, and you all know how small those primes are for the Micro Four Thirds. But so this one is a little bit bigger, being an f2.8 and that full range. But man, that is a sweet lens. It is really, really nice. So cheap piece of kit, but it's beautiful.
It is. It is very beautiful. And let me grab this thing. I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm going to go down the lens route. I brought this thing to Paris with me as well. It's the Rokinon 7.5 millimeter, f3.5 fisheye lens.
Yeah,
Derrick, have you seen this?
That. Yeah, no, you and I talked about that. Yeah.
Yes, and I think I got this because of you, actually.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that was fun.
And so now it's my pick of the week. This thing is just insane. I mean, I forget how much it was. It's cheap, right? It's like $50 or something. Yeah, but it's relatively cheap, but sharp as all get out. It's tiny. Go on Amazon. I got it off of Amazon.
It's like $249, isn't it? Something like that.
Is it $249? Maybe it is. I think. Money's no object, whatever.
Yeah.
But comparatively speaking to the other fisheyes out there, this lens is insane. Who's counting? It's a rounding error. But I took this thing to Paris, and I was doing all kinds of just weird shots, and you know, because it's a micro four thirds camera and it's relatively little, you lay the camera on the ground, you know, and I would have the crowd of people sort of hover over the lens with under the Eiffel Tower, you know, so you get that kind of shot. It's just, you get so many cool things you can do with this. I was even shooting 4K video with this thing, which is also very fun. So all kinds of stuff that you can do. So yeah, definitely check it out. It's the Rokinon 7.5 millimeter f3.5 fisheye for micro four thirds, and it's how much, guys? It's $250.
I see it on sale for $249 a lot. If you hang out and if you're not in a hurry, I see it on sale a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And for a similarly priced or similar fisheye focal length, Derrick, on a full frame DSLR, what are you looking at?
I just more.
I was gonna say add another decimal point in there.
For Canon it would be 15. For Nikon it would be 16.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of money. So $250 for this is like next to nothing. So.
But you know, just to pile on to what you're saying, you know, I took a fisheye too. You know, and I love fisheyes when I'm traveling because, you know, you're doing all this stuff. I mean, I want to do something different all the time, and you know, and you have a little bit more time when you're traveling, right? You're hanging out at train stations or whatever. I don't know. Fisheyes just, every time I pull out the fisheye, it would just shake things up and it just get me going. You know, and I really like that about them.
Yeah, the danger of the fisheye is it's easy to miss shots because you're shooting with the fisheye all the time, and then you get home and you're like, why are all my shots fisheye shots? How come I did not take the lens off and get regular shots?
Interchangeable lens, Frederick.
I know. Remember I told you, you know, I have this focus.
I know. Maybe you should get a second body with just a fisheye on it.
Yes. But then that's more weight and, you know, defeats the purpose. Like Joseph said, it's all about the weight. Yeah. All right, guys. This has been a fantastic episode. Thanks to all you for coming on, and thanks to lynda.com for their support of this episode of This Week in Photo. In this episode, at the end of this episode, there's an interview that I did with my good buddy, Mr. Ralph Velasco. This is his second time on This Week in Photo, and he did we were essentially talking about some very specific and succinct tips for photographers when they travel, Derrick, right? So when you're popping around, how do you prepare? How do you research? What do you bring with you? What don't you bring with you? All that stuff. So we covered all that in this interview. So hang around after the ending music to listen to that interview with Mr. Ralph Velasco. Derrick Story, where can people go to see your tutorials on Aperture and photos and all that cool stuff?
Everything goes through thedigitalstory.com, including my Aperture and iPhoto content, which will still be useful for years to come.
Yes, it will. It will. You know, much like my shelf of Nikon gear here. You know, it's a little dusty, but I still have it. Just in case I need it, I have it. Just in case. Awesome. Well, Derrick, thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure having you. And Mr. Don Komarechka, where are you at online?
Well, I'm most active on Google+, so take a look for me there, and you'll find the links to that. And everywhere else, I am online at doncom.ca.
Excellent. And thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
And last but not least, the Aperture expert himself, my good buddy, Mr. Joseph Linaschke, who has learned his lesson not to brand himself with another company's brand.
Oh, yeah, right.
Joseph.
No, I don't know if I'm yet.
Where can people go to keep up with you?
So check out the other company's brand, apertureexpert.com. Soon to be something else. I'm not sure exactly what yet, but we're working on that. Or, of course, there's photojoseph.com for the world of photography.
Excellent. And thank you for coming on. Always good to have you on. You know, I have a feeling you're going to be on a lot in the next couple of years as all these changes roll out to photos and all this cool stuff.
Yeah, works for me.
So, looking forward to it. Cool. All right, listeners, be sure to check out our website over at thisweekinphoto.com, or if you want to connect with me, Frederick Van Johnson, you can find me at frederickvan.com. And with that, it is time to take that lens cap off.